Hi, this is Sheila with Conscious Conversation Central, and today is Thursday, May the 9th, 2019. And we're going to finally have the God being question mark conversation. I'm so happy too. Of the three of us, however, I'm the only one that has read Sophia's book. So, but we've Lisa and I have already talked a little bit, since we've met each other, really, about our experiences and things like that. And I did the review, which I know BZ hasn't seen. I don't think you've even seen the review, have you, Lisa? I did a book review of the book. And I stated in that many, many times over the course of my life, I've tried to have this particular conversation, and it don't always go so well. I'm sure part of that has to do with me in particular, but also it's a very triggering. So I guess maybe I should say warning. This may be a triggering subject, just like the last one that we did. So I don't know. I don't mind starting off. I was raised in a sort of religious, not overly religious, but I was the good little Christian and walked down the aisle at the age of 6, wanting to give my life over to Christ kind of thing. And, I could already read, and I'd already been doing all the Bible verses and all that sort of thing. And they kind of freaked out because I was so young. So, they sent the pastor to the house and questioned me and all that kind of thing to make sure that I knew what I was doing. I didn't understand all that then, by the way. I do now. But along about the age of 12, I was asking a whole bunch of questions that nobody could really answer. Like, well, how come this? And, how come these people aren't good enough? And what if they don't know? Are they still? And, nobody could give me any kind of answers, and I couldn't reconcile some of the horrific things I was seeing. So I kind of walked away for a while, but I also went back and started searching. I went to all different kinds of religions. I started out, of course, in the Baptist, and then I went to the Methodist, and then I went, thinking it was going to be a little bit different because, they had a thing with the Baptist, the Methodists did, And then I even went to a school for a little while with the Pentecostals. Oh, that was fun. And then I've been to a Catholic church a couple of times, and I studied with the Mormons for about a couple months. Actually, I was studying with the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses at the same time. Oh, I finally had to tell them all that, well, I feel like source is, I actually told the Mormons I thought my God was bigger than their God because they didn't want to leave. So, that's actually been just a few years ago, before I got involved and really started understanding that, oh, wait a minute, I'm source. So that's been my trajectory. I thought I'd share that right away. But, there just was a whole bunch of questions that nobody could really actually answer properly. And it seems like a whole passel of folks didn't even know what the ecumenical council was, or the fact that the book that they all claim was written by God was actually ordered by the Emperor Constantine back in like 362 AD. It's like, what? So, like I said, this is a very triggering subject for a lot of folks, but
God showed up long before Constantine and been tinkering for quite some time, before the known history. So,
Yeah, that whole thing of let's make man in our image is always, that was another one that nobody could really answer. And that was before I even knew anything about the tinkering, to be honest. And that's the one thing that they kind of left in there that nobody could answer. It's the royal we. Okay. So I want to say this too, because this is one of those conversations that a lot of folks say it's the intention behind what you're doing that matters. And I kind of just left it go at that. But something felt uncomfortable to me about, well, if they're doing good works and it's the intention, doesn't matter what it is, it's the intention. And then I read Sophia's book. So, and I'm not going to spoil that for everybody, but I now it's very
Well, and yeah, there's let's come back to that around the intention thing,
okay.
because that's that sounds like sales and marketing right there.
Well, that's what it felt like to me when I heard it too.
I mean, it could be absolutely so, but the frequency depends. But anyway, we'll come back to that. I'll just say that I used to go to church 6 days a week, and then I got thrown out of Bible study class because I asked too many questions and was certain of too many things, which they couldn't come back with a retort. And this was, but I went to an Episcopalian school.
Well, yeah, that there was a big synchronicity involved with reading the book too, that I want to say, because the last time when I was studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses, that was the last time I saw them was 4 years ago. No, almost 5 years ago. Right here in the same house. As I was sitting right here reading, the first set of Jehovah's Witnesses came to the door. So I opened it. And they didn't stay. Same reason. There was too many questions. So.
Well, the other thing is that what's it's interesting how it all ties together. I mean, the God being is who people think that the top dogs on this planet, and the top dogs who run the false construct. Well, first of all, they're nowhere near the top dogs. They're middle management, barely, and they work for the God being. And I don't mean as in service to God and all that kind of stuff that one thinks, if their intention is correct and all that kind of stuff. So the 3D and 4D, which is where it comes from, because all of this pedophilia is not a 3D, third dimensional vibration. Satanism is not a third dimensional vibration. All of those energies, predilections, all those kinds of things are fourth dimensional, lower fourth dimensional energy frequency. And yes, in God's image. And that was the very beginning of the whole thing with, whites and blacks. Because the Anunnaki were of the white race of reptilians, and so they wanted the beings who were their most functional slaves, most handmaiden type slaves, most, close to the minions of touching their food and all that kind of stuff, to be white like them. And then others could be whatever. And so that was part of their tinkering on that. It's also part of and this is all, I'm saying all of this from a very linear, narrow, focused perspective, which seems kind of like an oxymoron because it's a head stretcher. But nonetheless, from a tight aperture focus, the concept was to have if you're not of indigenous, and I mean on the planet, so indigenous to the planet, I'm not talking about just indigenous tribes or those kinds of things.
Right.
Which is kind of an oxymoron now that I think about right here, how Europeans aren't indigenous. Yes, if they're talking about perhaps to America, but they're on the planet. So I'm talking about on the planet. I'm not talking about divvying up to countries or social structures or anything, just on the planet. So I'm only talking about Gaia, indigenous to Gaia. And there needed to be hybridization going on with a lot of incorporation of the humans who were on the planet in order for them to survive in the being. Because if the beings that are not, I guess you'd say native, I'm not sure the right word, that are not of Gaia, cannot survive for all that long on Gaia. Very short lifespan, very troubled, and it's an energetic thing. It has to do with the makeup of the DNA and the energetics, because they're not in alignment and cannot reach coherence with the being that they reside on. So Gaia's not a rock that appears blue and it just kind of spins around in there.
Right. Now, just so I can make sure I'm understanding what you're speaking on here, when you say not indigenous to the planet, you for all intents and purposes are speaking beings that came here from elsewhere, yes. Extraterrestrials.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure, because you didn't say that, the extraterrestrial part. And I know we've not had the Anunnaki conversation either, but I feel that must be coming too now. It's going to have to, I feel. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what you meant there. And that would make sense because of the frequency that Gaia holds. Well, there's of course, I don't know how true any of that is, but generally the idea was supposed to be that you couldn't, indigenous to the planet would not be able to survive off planet without Gaia's heartbeat, so to speak, the frequency being artificially induced. Because of that very same thing, I'm imagining.
Well, yes. So if you were talking about it, I can't think of the name. Was it Homo erectus erectus or Homo sapiens sapien? So just the I'm trying to simplify it. So prior to the God being showing up and doing all their tinkering, there were eons and eons and eons of seeding of Earth and and seeing how from all sorts of many different star beings and systems, and you could say, a bit of different tinkering with that as well. But they would leave, come back a million or so years later, and see it. So we have many races already within us from all of that, but they left us to be our own thing. The last level, again, very linear, was the Anunnaki coming and tinkering, and the whole God thing, because you have to then set up you need to set up structures and systems for control of different things, and that's hence the God being came on it. So to answer, the reason I bring that forward is because of that. No, we have no problem leaving, because we are the stuff of we're star beings already. That's one of the reasons that we're so coveted. That's one of the reasons that we're so marketable. That's one of the reasons that we're such ultra valuable commodities from our DNA all the way up, because we fully, absolutely come from this planet Earth, and we have all of the other, I think it's at least, I'm not certain of the number, but I've heard at least 14, between 14 and 21 races that part had, come into us. So no, we don't have any problem with that.
Oh, okay.
So we can do both. And originally, the planet Earth was designed to set up as a living library. Hence that, because it's a the DNA from other races came in, and all is encoded within all of us. And a lot of other extraterrestrials and beings don't have the same things that we have. They don't have the same capabilities. They don't have the well, it's depending on how you look at it, the 13 strands up to 144 strands of DNA. They don't have them.
So is that your ticket to ride for incarnation? You have to have the proper soul codes? Is that?
It's not so much soul code. Well, it's because it's the vessel codes, for here.
Okay.
And of course, your question is not as simple as a question that it may seem, because of the whole trapping system, and this gets into the God being, go to the light, and when you're greeted on the other side, and the pearly gates and all that kind of stuff, that's part of the trapping system. So when you die and you get on the long line, to the pearly gates to come in, you actually want to be going the other direction really fast. because what that's doing is putting you right back in down on the planet again, because of the trapping system, which is much more dismantled than it has been, but it still is in some effect. And it's, if you were to look at the planet, you would see sideways, it's a very thin, fine, fine filament of energy, golden energy, which traps the souls in and recycles them back down through another thing. So when you ask that question, if once a being from various different soul origins comes in without a tremendous amount of work and a whole bunch of success, they're stuck. They can't get back out, because they're part of the trapping system. And part of the trapping system, and God and going to the light and all that kind of stuff, hence the God being title, is that if you have a short go around, and as your soul is trapped and then recycled back in,
Rinse and repeat.
you've disconnected all of the reconnect from a multi-locational consciousness, from a recall consciousness, not only to what the 30 years, 50 years, depending, that you were just on the planet and all that you learn, but anything from your true connection. So if that keeps getting severed and you don't recall it, then it's really easy, or certainly a lot easier, to keep you in the whole slavery system, because you're not putting two and two and two and two and two and two and two together, because it got stopped. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I had my microphone.
Yeah.
So I could pour water. Yeah, it makes sense. And yet there's a part of me that, so I'm not certain. I have some levels going on in here right now, because I hear what you're saying, and I've heard that before, and I have felt that was true. And now I'm feeling as though, I know that you said that it's not as strong or something as it was. Or maybe the reason I'm feeling this is that this time it's because as more of me awakens and remembers who I actually am, I can't see that working. And there's with the, I mean, I guess there's something trying to come in, and I'm trying to grasp it, so I'll stop right there. I'm not sure. Something is telling me that that's either changed now or it's about to.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Part of the system that generated, powered the trapping system, and the grid tracking and trapping, was part of it was taken out, and Denise LeFay has done quite a lot of writing on that, a number of others as well, but she just popped into my head. So when, I think it was April of 18, I think.
I believe it was 2017, if you're speaking of Denise LeFay, because I just recorded that.
Was it 2017? Okay.
Yes.
April. Yeah.
The Saturn moon.
Yes.
And she was referring to David Icke's Saturn moon matrix. Yeah. And I agree with her on that. And maybe that's what I'm feeling. But it also has to do with awakening's not really the right words, but say what?
Well, go ahead.
Well, the ascension energies.
Right.
It feels like the more that we wake up right here in our skins, it would make a afterlife trap impossible. And I'm not even sure I have to experience an afterlife until I choose it. So that's going to change the game.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the whole way to give yourself, you could say I was just trying to think of a funny kind of metaphor. The crystalline loppers to lop through the chain. That's making the grid so you can pop out and float on out, or or inoculate yourself from that before you cross over, all those kinds of things, is holding the expanded consciousness within your being in a more and more and more and more predominant way, where you're residing in that frequency and holding that energy. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that. For some beings, they're absolutely doing that. They don't need to have ever heard about the word ascension or anything else. It's how, and they don't have to know about energy or anything. It's just how they flow and how they work. And for people who are actively, consciously doing different things to activate their DNA, to expand their consciousness, and are on a hyper accelerated path of ascension, absolutely yes. But I was speaking more kind of in hindsight, that because for some people this is like
brand new topic.
Whoa.
Yeah, no, I yeah, you're right. I guess I just jumped to, yeah, while I feel like that it was absolutely in place, and actually very tightly in place.
Yeah, and Source took it out. And those were the energy frequencies that came in to take that out, and they were just directed in specific ways. And just as much as the last, what were I think on the third big direct trajectory blasts of CMEs over about a, what was it, 12, 14 day period. That sent, the person you were talking about to the hospital, and, to a cardiologist, and, nothing wrong with him. All those kinds of things, because all the gloves are off. I mean, if you were to use linear metaphors, the gloves are off. It's time to, let's go. So, yeah. But there's, back to what you were saying about Constantine and stuff, there's it's like a lot of things. That stuff is hidden in plain sight. It has to be. And in that particular, the Bible, there is much hidden in plain sight. Again, if you're going to go from linear, of both sides, of the constricted and the lower frequency vibration and the expanded. So the actual Christ and Christed light and the Christos frequencies, and all of the trapping system and the thwarting and the sales and marketing to beguile you. The serpent's in there too, except the serpent isn't playing the role of the serpent. The serpent has the God, there, kind of a thing. So again, it's an energy frequency. I forgot. It was funny. I don't know why this just popped in my head, but I remember dipping into the My Little Laundry room here, which is also the brew house, to take a call from Heather at one of the hotel stops on the tour she had, and then it was part of something she and I were talking about. I then hung up that call, and before I went to go relay put the video up, I listened to, and I can't think of it, but a certain passage in the Bible, and I found the passage, maybe it was Revelation or something else, but I found it in an audio reading of it. And it was amazing to me that it was like totally different words, or a language that I had all of a sudden could translate. So in other words, I told you I started this by saying I went to church 6 days a week. And so this is not something that I just, read or listened to for the first time, because this was right. And what was fascinating to me was to hear this and see and hear and see the energy of the frequency of the words that were in the passage that were being read had completely their true meaning, the true discourse that was being given and laid out, which had, for most been hidden in plain sight before that, came through. So anyways, that's just a side that has to do with all of this that just popped into my head, and that was a year and a half ago.
Well, there is some truth there too. I mean, it's there. Because I remember, well, for me, I was born one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And, I really believed it, because I was taught it from birth. And I had a very deep connection to Source. And I was being told that was Jehovah. And I really believed that until, about puberty, I started to see things. And I don't know, by the time I was 16, it was so blatant. I felt like I couldn't worship. First of all, this being was doing heinous things to humanity. And I could not wrap my brain around that. How could I have more compassion as a very young human being than God had for his own creations? That didn't make any sense to me at all. And I couldn't feel truth in everything that I was being taught, only some of it. And for me, in withdrawing that and trying to, in looking back, I had really strong guidance all along, and I trusted it. And I knew that guidance was real, but I wasn't going to label it Jehovah God anymore. And, it wasn't until much later that, I started holding it as guides. But that guidance said to me, because I was trying to decide how much of this to throw out, because I could feel truth in it. And I didn't want to just toss it all out the window. But we had studied organized religion quite a bit. And I could already see through, like, I didn't jump to another religion. I just decided religion was wrong for me. And so I was trying to, sort of sort out for myself where I stand and in it. And the one thing that stuck out for me was Jesus's words. Like, he was saying things that I felt like were truth, and I felt them deep within me. And so what I did is just started clinging to those things and letting that sort of inform me. And the one thing that I guess was the turning point where I was able to sort of embrace the next thing, if you will, because I didn't want to just run screaming. I wanted to walk toward the truth. And Jesus said, and this scripture kept coming up for me, that he wasn't seeking worship, and he told everyone, all of these things you can do, and even greater things the least among you can do. And that really struck me. And so I thought, okay, so I think what he's trying to say is, this is the path. Follow me, meaning take the path. And the path was Christ consciousness, walking toward the embodiment of knowing self on all dimensions of self, because that's really how he was able to execute all of these miracles that made people go, I'm not worthy, and begin to fall down on their knees and worship. So instead of falling down on my knees, I wanted to take his advice, and pick up my cross, if you will, and walk the Christed path, to walk toward knowing myself on all dimensions of self. And to me, that felt like the noble pursuit. And I feel like at that moment, I was like, okay, so Christ set the bar and these are the miracles, then that means I can do them. And so I just decided to set about creating miracles. So first, so I could prove it to myself. And once I did, then that was it. And the rest, well, and so I'm here now telling you about it.
Yeah, I have this quote here. I'm seeing if I can pull up, because something that you said reminded me of the quote from Jesus, but maybe it's not.
Okay.
Well, Lisa, thank you for saying it in the way that you did just then, because that is exactly the problems that I was having myself, was being able to reconcile this, not only the heinous, I couldn't understand why it was okay, to say thou shalt not kill, but by the same token, say, go over here and kill everyone. Every single one, and take that land. That's a little bit of a really huge thing. And I'm like,
Yeah, and how is that a gift from God exactly?
Yeah, well, exactly. What did he do?
Yeah.
You're the one that went over and killed everybody to take the land.
And then you have to live with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, so there seems to be an awful lot of like I said, for me anyway, well, and that's exactly the way it gets put then after that is, well, no, I don't. I'm waiting for you to explain it, because and then to reconciling all of that with this being that was purportedly his son, that was none of that, and didn't demand worship, and like you said, absolutely did not want worship. None of that made any sense to me, how those things were supposed to be the same in any way, shape, or form. So did you find the quote, BC?
No, I haven't found it. It's on there somewhere, but that's with a lot of other lists of to-dos.
Oh, gotcha.
For the real work here to do. So, but it
Gotcha.
had to do, paraphrase it, when you said the least among us. And part of that, I think, dovetails into the quote of the innocence, and the innocence of childlike wonder. Because first of all, you're not enraptured in you got to do this, or you got to be right, or I got to, cow or toe the line. And all those things are, again, all subjugation. And all of that is part of the recipe for dividing and conquering and being subjugated and being minions and slaves. And, lest anybody stir a little bit, you throw another religion in, and okay, that's a bad religion, so get them. And because if there's all that strife continuing and you're barely eking out subsistence, or you're really good at towing the line, and you're really good at going, go kill that infidel and go get that one and that one, then you can get promoted, because you're so disconnected from listening to your own, inner guidance, that you're easily manipulated as well. So there was a very easy to kind of sort into two things. Of course, the third one would be to say, well, the ones who are not buying either way, they're an infidel, or blasphemous, or woman, or any of those kinds of things. And what's fascinating, so that's why is this gets it's bigger than it's the God thing, which is a religion thing, but it's also morphed over the centuries into business suit things, because we didn't have villages so much anymore. We didn't have the church where everybody has to go, and we didn't have all those kinds of things. So you have to now you have the corporate job was the church, in essence, that you were going to, because it filled the same role as that. Because it's all about congregations of beings congregating, and you give them the memo and they follow the company line, and it's the same thing. It's just in order to survive the continually expanding and increasing wakingness of the beings on the planet, it had to morph and change, to keep more of the flock. These were now city sheep instead of country sheep.
City sheep instead of country sheep. I like that
kind of thing. And so you make it a little bit more hip, a little bit more upscale. Now you're working for the man. Well, yeah. So the man is still the God being. He's just changed the thing. And then you have the avarice and all that kind of stuff for a hamster treadmill that you're never going to, we talked about this in releasing the bonds of gravity. You're never going to get to that thing. And again, on that hamster wheel, you can sort and winnow your followers in different ways. The ones will do all sorts of things because they get one paw on the things that they really want, and the other three whiz by, and then or you get them kind of their hand in the cookie jar, and now you can use that to hold stuff over them. So it's the thread that connects all of the obedience and the subjugation. Yes. And that's all from the linear perspective, because to a broader perspective, we all agreed to do it so that we could go forth and know source and go through all of the things. And then just to step back for a minute it's all also complicit, and in a lot of respects, knowingly and willingly complicit, although not knowing and willing, done that on a conscious level because you thought it was something else. So yes, you would say, yes, I was complicit in going to church, and yes, I was complicit in following the Lord's word, and yes, I was complicit. Yes, absolutely. Except it was covert, and the intention, right? That's why, to go back to what you started with a long time ago, Sheila said, well, if the intent is right. Well, there was intent. Absolutely. The intent was absolutely crystal clear, very direct, very powerful, very strong. Not the intent you would be told or sold, but the intent was there. And it was to do all the things that I've just talked about, and to use this as a guide.
Right. Well, I've always, once I sort of figured it out, that religion as a whole, most specifically organized, but it doesn't really have to be organized either, is a method of domination and control, pure and simple, from my point of view. Now, I want to be clear too, because it's kind of come to me to say this, that for me, source is not the God being. And this is why when the conversation regarding intent to worship or pray or whatever came up in conversation in my life. My whole issue was, how do you know for certain what it is that you're actually praying to? Well, it doesn't matter. It's the intent. No, I don't think so. I just, that's for me, and I'm, but I just don't think that that's the case there. But I wanted to make sure I said that, because I do feel there is a prime creator source, all that is, that which I am a spark of. And Christ spoke of that as well when he said that his Father was within.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a big confusion that goes on, I think, in the organized religion, in that, and it's specific and it's on purpose, again, for that method of domination and control.
Well, and that's why the family is so dysfunctional intentionally, because it's the father figure is the God, which is about as dysfunctional as one can get as far as love and you don't demand respect, you command respect. You also, and you command that connection and that connectivity and that coherence as one. It's heart to heart.
Which is totally different than subservience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of that goes on in the religion as well. Right. Like you were saying about the Father. Yeah. That hierarchy. Right? The Father. And it denotes the God being, and then it trickles down into that dysfunctional family situation.
And weren't we just talking about this morning, Sheila, in the car? To me, I could just see so clearly, ooh, what a clever little twist of the true Holy Trinity into the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which always rubbed me the wrong way from get-go. I could never figure out any of that. It just made no sense to me at all. And how does Father have all these children without mother? I just, as a child, it was confusing. So yeah.
Yep.
Well, and like all of these things, all beings have known all along. It's whether they felt allowed themselves to feel it and to connect with that. Because you're never not connected to source. You can absolutely shut down the feeling of that connection, the knowing of that connection, and shut away a conscious realization of the coherence of that connection. But you're always there, and unlike the God being, source is absolutely with the free will. So if you want to be in a religion, if you want to be subjugated, if you want to do all these various things that help you toe the line and company line, whether it's the company line with a pointy red hat and red shoes and gold robes, or any variation thereof, or I don't know, an Armani suit or something, and you're still towing the line, and that's a free will choice. Even if you think, well, my husband, we have to go to church, that's a free will choice. It's all a free will choice.
Well, I've experienced within my own family the fear that comes up when this kind of conversation comes up. That's blasphemy. I don't want to talk about it. You're making me uncomfortable. How can you even think that way? What is wrong with you? Of course, I get that a lot, but
Yeah, I've heard it all too. Yeah.
and it's just the absolute and in one case abject terror that I felt coming from that being in regards to anything that wasn't in regards to that. I mean,
have you ever been in a house where you're noticing that there's abuse in the house? It may not be physical, but there's definitely verbal abuse and fear instilled. Well, it's the same kind of thing.
yes.
So interesting that the God being is, at the head of the table of this kind of abusive fear thing. Well, so that'll tell you something. That's a great way to keep people in line. There's a whole point of that. It's all connected, and it has nothing. Well, the labeling is on religion. The labeling is on the God and God being, but it's how you get the workers and the slave commodity. Because remember, as again at the beginning of the conversation where we started all this, the beings that are so lowly that need to get down on their knees and supplicate themselves to the God being. Actually, oddly enough, are to the true God being. I'm not talking about source. True God being are far more. And again, this is from a linear perspective, but far more connected to the real source of all that is, because of or one way you could see how they're far more connected in the sense, because of that expanded DNA and all that kind of stuff, is because with all of the tinkering, with all of the subterfuge, with all of the subjugation, with all of the programming, conditioning, with all of that, through all of the occult and the lies and all of that kind of stuff, yet here the being is waking up and shedding all of that to come home to themselves, which brings them home to the truth of who they are. And that's what's unfolding right this moment.
Well, I did also hear a question in regards to, because of what I said about the abject terror. And I know that that's not always felt. There are, what about during praise and worship and the good feelings that take over in the body in regards to, because this is what he gives me when I supplicate myself, let's say. And the only way I can answer that is that I can have that feeling all my own without that. A good piece of music will give me that. Singing at the top of my lungs will give me that. Well, and so I'm not quite certain that it was a question, and so I'll just throw it out to you guys too. But that's my feeling on it, is that I don't know whether it has to do with belief. I do know that, because this God being is, like you were saying, more than likely a different dimension, density, whatever, whether it be 4D, 5D, 6D, it's different than mine at this moment. And so I do feel that that can have something to do with it as well. But I also know with all of me that I am capable of inducing that that kind of feeling within my, because I've had that. I did go to church when I was a kid, and I did a couple of times as an adult too, when I thought I needed to get my kid a little God shot in there. So, he didn't turn out to be a complete heathen, kind of idea, because I wanted him to at least hear the words of Christ is what I was thinking, So I know that those feelings are there. So, but I've experienced them, but that's what I'm trying to say. I can, and I have, and I do quite regularly produce that within my own body myself. So,
well, if you're thinking that how can I, if the question was, how can I go to church and when I'm in church feel those feelings, they're then ascribing that he, which is interesting in and of itself, he is giving me that. Okay, that could be the way that you're ascribing it, but you're there too. And you're there, I would sense, in a sense of openness and relaxation and joy. And there may be one rock and gospel song or some hymn or the music itself and the vibrations, you're liking all of that. And so because it's a contemplative space, or you think it's a very pretty church, or whatever it is, in that moment, you are in effect coming in coherence with the truth of who you are. He, she, it is coming into connection with all that is you. And yeah, he, she, it is giving it to you because you are giving it to you and allowing it to come in that moment. And you just happen to be sitting in a church doing it. Yeah. You can be in a park doing it. You can be all sorts of places doing it. It's like the thing that, people sense, well, when they talk about someone who's quote unquote died and they feel bad because they had a particularly good relationship and there were moments that made their heart sing and that, because again, you were in that same kind of a coherence structure of what I was just speaking about, where you were in the zone of that connectivity and coherence of the truth of who you were. And you allowed yourself in those moments to be that. It wasn't the other being doing anything to you to allow you to feel that. It was you allowing yourself to feel that. And in that moment, the reflection of each other off each other were shining back onto each other, in a reflective way. And they could behold that. Because
thank you for putting it that way, because that's exactly.
That's it.
Yeah. I really appreciate the way you put that, because that is, and there's that, and that's an important point, I feel, for folks to grok. Because it's this, to me, an interloper who is being given credit for all of that. And that's just, well, not right, but, so thank you for putting it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like this is actually a much bigger conversation, because there's a bunch more that could be said about all of it.
Well, like so many things, I think it is a very large conversation, because it is much more than just the God being and church or religion or any of this kind of stuff. It's actually got its, supply chains in everything.
True. But it's just another one of those things that it's taking the focus out there.
Yes.
I can't possibly do that for myself.
Yes.
Kind of feeling where, yes, you can. I do it all the time. And that is, like you said, it's you with you. And this bozo is taking credit. That's part of it for me. Honestly, that's a part of it. for me. It's realizing that just the realization of it is that you don't need that. That's an oh wow, yeah. It's a middleman, just like with money, being a middleman, the bankers being a middleman. It's would it be fair to call that usury?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course.
Oh my. Usury on an energetic level.
At the least.
At the very least.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's physical too. I mean, the job is physical. Hey, I've been sitting in a few churches. Worship is physical. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a way that you have it's a structure, not only a physical structure, but a thought structure, an energetic structure, electromagnetic structure that is confining and trapping. So again, it's thwarting your own personal connection and coherence with source to the degree, at least from a conscious level, and it shifts how you walk and be in the world, and feel any connection to or lack thereof to your own capabilities, to your own magnificence, to your own brilliance. There's only that you went to church that you're, that, well, yeah. And look at the beauty in that design. I mean, it's awesome. The beauty in how that has been contrived and perpetrated and perpetuated. And
yep.
And you have different things, and it has been evolving in different ways as the expansion has been going on in different beings for a while to make them feel finally, and then kind of connect their feeling and their heart with their head and start to look in different places because they know something's amiss.
Well, you brought something up there about the structure too that reminded me of, and I'm going to link it in the show more section of this video. We touched on Eric P. Dollard's work and some of the information that he's talked about in another video that I think Lisa and I did with Kevin regarding Notre Dame. It way back when they, were building those structures. A lot of them, and almost all of them, are on energetic ley lines on the planet. And way back when Notre Dame and others were built, they had these huge pipe organs that can't even be built, is my understanding, anymore. And there's a lot of I'm not going to even pretend that I completely understand it, but it has to do with frequency and resonance and planetary alignments and all of that sort of thing. And that was done in essence to help to produce particular feelings in those structures, and capture that energy, that worship energy.
Yeah, well, it was also magnifying the spell that was put on those, just as most major bank branches, at least, headquarters at least, if not some of the branches as well, are on the same ley line, so that it can magnify the spell that's there. So in other words, the the cult intention behind them is on a very rich, very fertile, very expansive, high energy frequency ley line. You put it there, you put a spell on it, and actually what's happening is that expansive, heart-based, source-based energy is then generating the continuation of your spell.
Yeah. I wanted to, it's interesting that you pointed out about the banks. That actually has been, there's some disclosure actually took place about that in, of all things, a show called The Magicians. And I can't remember what episode, but in that particular episode, they actually were in a bank, the Federal Reserve, a Federal Reserve Bank, and the magicians were trying to get the spell off of the bank. It was so, I mean, that's, a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's fiction. Yeah, okay. I just feel like there's a whole lot of stuff that's being seeded in the consciousness. Source is seeing to it that there's different things that are being seeded in the consciousness and preparing folks. So it's very interesting to me that you brought that up.
Yeah, well, it also is the rule, it has to be hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yep, because this is a free will sitch we got going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you weren't paying attention, hey, that's your free will choice.
and you know what? It's, for some reason, this is, I'm beckoned to say this now. Anyone that doesn't think that's so, in regards to having to put things in plain sight and having notice be given, yes, that's a real thing. It's a very legal thing too. I know that because I got my last divorce, not my last divorce, my second divorce that way. It had to be in the paper.
Yep.
Didn't matter if he saw it or not.
Public. That's it.
Didn't matter if he saw it or not. If it was in the paper, it was good. That's good to go. It's the same thing with the free will thing. As long as it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you think it's fiction. Okay, whatever. We told you. That kind of thing. Well,
and that's how too that, you know, just you can have an individual being can have the power to stand up and thwart things because they can break that you know, occult hidden in plain sight of one particular thing and bring it to the more conscious level. Again, not everybody has to hear this one particular being doing that, but it's shifted where it's, you know, now it's no longer hidden. And Heather, one of the things that Heather says a lot is, you know, it only takes one. Well, it's that one that moves it to a different level, and that changes the level of consciousness that it then resides in, and that shifts the energy frequency of it, whether you're talking about the God being or religions or any of those kinds of things. And you can have a long list. They are all tied to the God being because that's a terrific mechanism for subjugation.
yes, exactly.
And control.
Yep, exactly. Well, I really appreciate the two of you coming and talking about this with me. And it is a much larger conversation because we can go in a whole bunch of different directions with it, believe you me. And I'm, like I said, I'm really excited. I'm going to get to have a very similar, I think, maybe different conversation with Sophia Love about her book, The Imposter. I wanted to mention that here because, quite frankly, as I said in the review, I've wanted to have this particular conversation ever since I started Conscious Conversation Central 2 years ago. And quite frankly, personally, I don't, maybe I didn't have the courage. Maybe it just didn't come up, whatever, but divine timing and all of that. I'm very grateful to Sophia because her book took a lot of courage in my view to actually write and go ahead and put it out there. And I want to say again to everyone, I'm going to be putting a link to her Amazon for that. Do yourselves a favor and read that book. I'm telling you, it caused a click for me on a whole bunch of levels. So yeah, do yourself a favor and read that book. And so, did either one of you want to say anything else before we close it out here? No? Okay, awesome. Well, we'll have ways for you to get in touch with both BZ and Lisa in the Show More section as usual. And I'm going to now, I even put myself a little note here to make sure I remember. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the channel. There's a little bell icon right next to that if you want to be notified when I put the videos up. And I'm also stating that I'm receiving love donations to help this channel grow and to help me, go traveling. So until next time.